Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I'm pretty pissed right now. I've just spent hours trying to translate a freaking tapestry from Galactic Basic, which is written in Arabic alphabet, into English. You know, this is coming from an individual who's been described by teachers as barely literate. This was a struggle for me. Like, my greatest fear is getting pulled over at a police checkpoint and being forced to recite the alphabet backwards, something I would struggle with while sober, let alone after a few drinks. So, our best translation, wow. That was difficult. But yeah, let me give you a little more context about what I'm talking about. But before we continue, spoilers from episode 3 of Skeleton Crew ahead. You have been warned. So the kids and Janana Wood have escaped from the pirate planet of Borgo and are force-using pirate captain out of the kindness of his heart decides to help the kids find their way home to Adatin, the mythical world that all pirates seem to know about because it's supposedly full of treasure and valuables. So the crew travels to this beautiful moon that's orbiting a gas giant and meet up with this little owl alien known as Kh'ymm. She's a collector of trinkets and data pads from all over the galaxy, both modern and new. But what she's really after is information. She hoards it. She's basically a librarian who has chosen to hold up on a moon with a very clear atmosphere that allows her to look up at the stars with a giant telescope. So she also specializes in finding lost things like planets and hyperspace routes, things like that. So she's kind of perfectly positioned to help these kids find Adatin.
The place looks great. I see you've been cleaning up.
Yes, my growing collection. Trinkets and tokens from 1,000 different worlds.
There's 1,000 worlds?
Interesting how head of the class Fern doesn't even seem to know very basic information about the galaxy. I mean, even I know that there's more than a few hundred stars or a few thousand stars in the galaxy. There's probably endless amounts, right? So either Fern is not that informed, or maybe the teachers on Adatin see no reason to teach their students about astrology, or what lies outside of the barrier protecting their planet, and also keeping everyone out. I guess why teach kids about something that they aren't supposed to ever see? So Kh'ymm, being a collector of artifacts and tomes, clearly knows the story and legend about Adatin, but even she is stunned when she actually meets living inhabitants from this legendary planet.
Where are you from, children?
Let me explain.
You've heard of it, right?
Adatin. Adatin?
Luckily, Kh'ymm actually has that tapestry I was talking about that depicts kind of the foundation or the purpose of Adatin, why it was first created.
You see, your home has been purposely hidden from the rest of the galaxy. There is no map to Adatin. This scroll depicts the jewels of the old Republic, planets of wonders kept hidden for their protection.
So this is what I spent forever trying to translate, and as you'll see, it's a bit messy and incoherent. It wasn't just that the individual Arabic characters were hard to read. Sometimes the grammar was wrong, and sometimes there were complete words that just didn't make any sense. Now, granted, I'm not the best at translation, right? So I did double, triple, and quadruple check my work to make sure I got everything right, and even so, I went on to Reddit afterwards, and I went online to find other people who have translated this tapestry, and I found a lot of the same errors that I found in the writing. Like, there's something completely off about this. And the strange thing is, if you take a look at like some of the buildings on Adatin, they do have Arabic accurately displayed on those buildings. And if you look at Wim's storybook, the Arabic there is also pretty accurate. So this tapestry is kind of just odd. It's different. Now, this might be the result of just a lazy graphic designer, but then again, this tapestry is beautiful. I mean, they clearly spent a lot of time making it look awesome. So you'd think they would put a little more effort into the Arabic. And like I said in previous examples of Arabic in the Star Wars Galaxy, it usually translates into things that make sense. But with this tapestry, not only were the words kind of weird, the actual orientation of the words and how they're laid out in sentences doesn't really make sense. At one point, the sentences even flip upside down on the side of the scroll, and then the last two lines at the very end of the scroll are written backwards, which is just super confusing. I thought I was reading a completely different alphabet before I realized what was happening. So yeah, either the graphic designer here just copy and pasted things randomly because they didn't care, or maybe because they were rushed for time, or maybe this was purposely done to just make things confusing. I think it is the latter because not everything is random. I mean, there are like fragments of sentences, phrases that refer to Adatin that are clues about what this planet is. For instance, on the bottom half, we have this sentence, and the world's eyed, withered, and the families were nourished, and the people were housed and work, but as the jewels sere and not hat peoples of many public. I know that's kind of rough, but I believe what these fragments are telling us is basically why or how these jewel worlds were created, these 9 planets created by the Old Republic as treasure or wonder worlds. Seems like either these worlds were originally barren or they took on refugees from other planets and basically created and engineered these paradises. During both the Old Republic period and even the High Republic period, there were massive refugee movements, and there were also massive government programs, either to explore the areas outside of the galaxy or creating, other great works like infrastructure projects and stuff like that. And so it's completely feasible that they would also try to settle planets and have government settled planets that are completely planned and organized. But it also seems like eventually they kind of just hid these planets from the public because I guess they were very desirable to live on, and a lot of people wanted to go there. On the other side of the tapestry, we have this line. And so the Senate deemed it good, and Ness their republic, and so founded were the nigh and them settled. Something work and something kinship. Our lady is kind of blocking the view, so we don't know exactly what it says. Again, this sounds like a fever dream sentence, like we have fragments of words, nouns, verbs, but they all seem to point towards certain things that make a coherent meaning. It's clear this concept of these jewel planets was something voted on by the Galactic Senate. This means it was the Republic's official policy to settle these planets, and I guess it wasn't just about wealth generation. It seems like the Republic was committed to improving society. This was an incubator for a better future. This isn't exactly a weird thing to do if you think about it. In our own world, governments do experiments like this all the time, of course at a smaller scale. For instance, you have a monetary policy known as universal basic income. This is something that's been tried out at the state and city level in many countries. With income inequality growing rapidly and more resources concentrated in corporations, this is one of the more bold ways of redistributing income to the masses. The idea is that the government includes in their fiscal budget cash payments, either done monthly or yearly, to all the citizens of a country. At the same time, the government still tries to maintain a market-driven system where individual citizens can spend their universal basic income payments in. Alaska arguably is one of the only places in the world that has a UBI permanently in place through their Alaska Permanent Fund, which gives residents yearly dividends, I believe, funded by the state's oil revenues. This usually amounts to like a few $1,000s a year, which is really nice. And of course, you have to carry out experiments like this on a smaller scale before you roll them out on a wider scale, because you want to see what works, what doesn't, tweak things, and sometimes, some policies don't make sense, and you axe them, and you give up, and you try something new. And because of all these small-scale UBI experimentations, economists and politicians found that UBI works best not as an income replacement, but as a supplement. This can help the average person cover their grocery payments, medical costs, or rent. And if someone does have enough money, this just goes to their saving, or maybe they're more likely to, quit their job and start their own new business. Overall, these experiments at the local level boosted the economy because you're flooding money into an area. But at the same time, you're also giving the average citizen more money, which is generally going to create a more healthy economy. The only problem is the cost of such a program is going to be extremely, prohibitively expensive. And so this isn't really an easy thing to do, especially if you consider that most governments in the world right now are heavily indebted and facing slower economic growth because the world's economic engine seems to be slowing down a little bit. But this is really one of the few ways you can quickly redistribute some wealth to people in the lower economic classes to just basically stabilize society, because clearly there's a lot of social unrest right now, and it's probably caused by this. And so these smaller localized experiments are very important and can inform policymakers on whether these systems will work or not. Now, I'm not 100% sure if universal basic income is going to be good for society or not, but this is just an example of a government experiment, right? That's not necessarily very sinister. And so what we're seeing here in Skeleton Crew on Adatin could be something similar to this. You know, when I look at a world like Adatin with its clean environment and clean streets, if you can look past the camera droids and the very demanding school system, I believe this is exactly what these jewel planets were all about. The pirates who were trying to find their way here might envision riches and gold, but I think the Republic was quite idealistic back in the day, and perhaps not just solely focused on generating material wealth, especially if these jewel planets were founded during the High Republic era when the galaxy was plenty wealthy. And again, they were focused on very different things because there had been peace for several centuries. And so when you have basically a golden age peak civilization, you start to look at more minute parts of society where you want to improve. That's where you have these type of social experimentations, and this is also where things can go really bad or can really go well. Chancellor Lina Soh was one of the leading figures of the High Republic period, and she basically started what was known as the Great Works. This was a series of infrastructure programs, attempts to broker peace between rival species, and also a period of time where there was a lot of investment into all sorts of new technologies and policies. Perhaps Adatin was a model world where the inhabitants were studied and analyzed to find out how to create the optimal economic conditions not only for growth but also for stability and increasing the overall well-being of the average citizen. This is the kind of program that I imagine Lina Soh would have wanted. And just because Lina Soh's intentions are pure does not mean that those pure intentions don't turn into a dystopian nightmare, because generally speaking, when you go too extreme in one way or another, even if you have good intentions, things can go horribly wrong. And if you take a look at the technocratic nature of Adatin's government, it does seem kind of dystopian with its surveillance state and labeling of all of its citizens. At the same time, though, it does seem like these inhabitants are quite content on this world, if not occasionally bored, which is always a good sign of stability. We also have to remember that Adatin had 8 other sister and brother worlds, probably with their own different types of economic and social systems. Taken together as a collective group of 9 different planets that were supposed to be, wonders or the future of the Republic, maybe Adatin doesn't look so weird. I imagine that even if Adatin was hidden from the Republic, they probably still had some connection to the old Republic government. I think the supervisor probably knows a lot more than the average person living on this planet, and whoever's in charge of Adatin probably decided to cut off complete contact from the galaxy when the Republic fell and turned into the Empire. This might be why Adatin is so isolated. And I'm guessing the longer they stay in this holding pattern, waiting for instruction from a central government that will never return, Adatin will begin to face more and more internal issues. It's also possible that the Republic did want to completely isolate Adatin, set it up and just kind of forget about it. I can definitely see a chancellor being distrustful of certain members of the opposition in the Senate or something like that, and just not wanting all parties to know about these treasure worlds, paradises. Maybe Adatin was supposed to just develop by itself and one day become connected to the wider galaxy by itself, where it could share its secrets from what it's learned, its true treasure. And this could be very boring information like the optimal tax burden you want to levy on your populace, or the best way to create bureaucratic systems to govern certain aspects of society. It doesn't have to be flashy. I really won't be surprised if the pirates that eventually make it to Adatin will be very disappointed at what they find here. That, or I could be wrong. Maybe Adatin wasn't just some social experiment. Maybe the reason why you have so many analysts and accountants on this world is that this planet is sort of like Fort Knox for the old Republic. The place where large amounts of precious metal were held. We talked about this in one of our previous videos. The galactic credit used to be based on a Erodium standard, and so maybe that is Adatin's purpose. That's why there are so many Erodium credits floating around. It's supposed to be there to stabilize the currency, and that's why we're hiding it from all eyes, because clearly people want to rob and loot this place. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below what you guys think, and also, did you translate that tapestry on your own in Arabesh? Let's compare notes. As usual, guys, thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.